Marcus Chen stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse office, watching the city lights flicker to life below. At 42, he had everything the world told him to want: a tech empire worth $3.2 billion, properties on 3 continents, and a name that made boardrooms go silent with respect. Yet tonight, like so many nights before, he felt the familiar hollowness settling in his chest. His assistant's voice crackled through the intercom. "Mr. Chen, your car is ready. The gala starts in an hour." "Thank you, Patricia." His reflection in the glass looked back at him. Expensive suit, graying temples, eyes that had forgotten how to truly smile. When did that happen? The charity gala was another obligation, another evening of champagne and calculated conversations. Marcus had donated millions to various causes over the years, but he couldn't remember the last time he'd actually met someone his money had helped. It was always checks signed, tax deductions filed, press releases distributed. As his driver navigated through evening traffic, Marcus scrolled through emails, barely registering the blur of humanity outside his tinted windows. A message from his sister caught his attention. "Marcus, Mom's birthday is next week. Will you actually show up this time?" He felt a pang of guilt. 3 years. It had been 3 years since he'd visited his mother in the modest assisted living facility across town. Too busy building an empire, he told himself. Too important. The gala was predictably elegant. Crystal chandeliers, string quartets, women in designer gowns, men discussing mergers over aged scotch. Marcus moved through it mechanically, shaking hands, making small talk, writing another substantial check for the evening's cause, a children's hospital expansion. "Mr. Chen, thank you so much for your generosity," the hospital director gushed. "Your contribution will change lives." Marcus nodded politely, but the words felt empty. Would it really? Or was it just another line item in his accountant's ledger? He left early, claiming a morning meeting. In truth, he couldn't bear another minute of the performance. The next morning, Marcus's routine was interrupted by an unexpected call from his mother's facility. "Mr. Chen, this is Sandra from Meadowbrook. Your mother had a minor fall yesterday. She's fine, but she's been asking for you." The guilt that had been simmering for years suddenly boiled over. "I'll be there this afternoon." Meadowbrook Assisted Living was a 40-minute drive from his office, a world away from the gleaming towers of his usual domain. The building was clean but modest, with worn carpets and the faint smell of institutional cooking. His mother, Eleanor Chen, sat in her small room, her leg elevated on a cushion. At 78, she was still sharp-eyed and dignified, though her hair had gone completely silver. "Marcus." Her voice held surprise and something else, hope, maybe, or sadness. "You came. Mom, I'm sorry. I should have. Sit down." She patted the chair beside her bed. "Tell me, are you happy?" The question caught him off guard. "I'm successful. That's not what I asked." Before he could answer, a knock interrupted them. A woman in scrubs entered, carrying a meal tray. She was perhaps in her mid-30s, with warm brown skin, natural hair pulled back in a practical bun, and eyes that seemed to notice everything. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Chen. I brought your lunch." Her voice was melodic, genuinely cheerful. Then she noticed Marcus. "Oh, you have a visitor. I'm Grace, one of the nurses here." "My son Marcus," Eleanor said, and Marcus heard the pride in her voice, pride he wasn't sure he deserved. Grace's expression shifted almost imperceptibly, recognition, then something cooler. "Chen, your mother talks about you often." There was something in her tone, not quite judgment, but not warmth either. It unsettled him. Over the next hour, as Marcus sat with his mother, Grace came and went, checking vitals, adjusting pillows, chatting easily with Eleanor, in a way that made his mother laugh. He found himself watching her, noticing the care she took with small gestures, the way she remembered details from previous conversations. "Grace is wonderful," Eleanor said after the nurse left. "She's been here 2 years. Did you know she's putting herself through nursing school? Works double shifts sometimes." Marcus felt an uncomfortable twinge. He'd donated to scholarship funds, but never thought about the actual people struggling to better themselves. As he prepared to leave, he encountered Grace in the hallway. On impulse, he stopped her. "Thank you for taking such good care of my mother." Grace studied him for a moment. "That's my job, Mr. Chen. though it would mean more to her if you visited more often. Money can't replace presence. The words stung because they were true. Before he could respond, she continued down the hallway, leaving him standing there, confronted by an uncomfortable truth. Marcus couldn't stop thinking about Grace's words. Over the next 2 weeks, he found himself visiting his mother more frequently. First out of guilt, then because he genuinely wanted to. And each visit he saw Grace. She was always professional, but maintained a careful distance from him. He noticed things, how she stayed late to sit with residents who had no visitors, how she knew everyone's favorite foods and small preferences, how she advocated fiercely for her patients' needs, even when it meant challenging doctors or administrators. One evening, arriving later than usual, Marcus found his mother's room empty. A staff member directed him to the common room, where he discovered Eleanor playing cards with 3 other residents, and Grace, still in her scrubs, dealing hands and laughing at someone's joke. "Marcus!" His mother's face lit up. "Join us!" He felt awkward, out of place in his $1,000 suit among these elderly people in comfortable clothes, but he sat down. Grace dealt him in without comment. As they played, Marcus listened to the easy conversation. Stories about grandchildren, complaints about the food, debates about old movies. His mother was animated in a way he hadn't seen in years. "Your mother is a card shark," Grace said, smiling as Eleanor won another hand. "She's taken $20 off me this month." "You let me win," Eleanor protested. "You're just better at bluffing than I am." Marcus found himself smiling, really smiling for the first time in weeks. After the game, as other residents headed to their rooms, Marcus helped Grace stack chairs. "You don't have to do that," she said. "I want to." He paused. "Can I ask you something? Why did you seem, cold toward me when we first met?" Grace stopped, considering her words carefully. "Do you really want to know?" "Yes, because I've seen your name on plaques and donor walls, Mr. Chen. Big checks for good publicity. But your mother sits in that room day after day, wondering if her successful son will remember she exists. You can't buy back time. You can't donate your way out of showing up for the people who actually love you." The words hit like a physical blow. Marcus felt his carefully constructed defenses crumbling. "You're right," he said quietly. "I've been a terrible son." Grace's expression softened slightly. "It's not too late to change that." That conversation became a turning point. Marcus began visiting his mother 3 times a week, then 4. He started arriving in casual clothes instead of suits, staying for hours instead of minutes, and he talked with Grace. At first, their conversations were brief, small talk while she worked, but gradually they deepened. He learned that she'd grown up in foster care, that she'd worked as a home health aide before deciding to become an RN, that she sent money to help her foster siblings even though she barely made ends meet herself. "Why nursing?" he asked one evening. "Because I know what it's like to feel invisible," she said simply. "When I was in foster care, there was this one nurse at the clinic who always remembered my name, asked about school, made me feel like I mattered. I want to be that person for others." Here was someone with a fraction of his resources making a tangible difference every single day. One afternoon he arrived to find his mother upset. Grace was there, holding her hand. "What happened?" Marcus asked, alarmed. "Mrs. Chen's friend Dorothy passed away last night," Grace explained gently. Eleanor was crying softly. "She had no one, Marcus. No family came to see her in 2 years. She died alone." The words pierced him. He sat beside his mother, holding her other hand, and for the first time in decades, he let himself cry too. For Dorothy, for all the years he'd wasted, for the man he'd become. Grace quietly left them alone, but later, Marcus found her in the break room, looking exhausted. "Long shift?" he asked. 16 hours. Covering for someone whose kid is sick." She rubbed her eyes. "I'm fine." "When's the last time you ate?" She laughed tiredly. "Breakfast, maybe." Without thinking, Marcus said, "Come on. There's a diner down the street. My treat." Okay. The diner was nothing like the restaurants Marcus usually frequented. Vinyl booths, laminated menus, coffee in thick ceramic mugs. It was perfect. Over burgers and fries, they talked for hours. Grace told him about her dreams of opening a community health clinic in underserved neighborhoods. Marcus shared things he'd never told anyone. His loneliness, his sense that he'd built an empire but lost himself in the process. It's not too late, Grace said, echoing her earlier words. You can't change the past, but you can choose differently going forward. How? The question came out raw, vulnerable. Start by asking yourself, what do you actually value? Not what you're supposed to value. Not what looks good in a press release. What matters to you? Marcus looked at this woman, this underpaid, overworked nurse who somehow had more wisdom than all the executives and consultants he'd ever hired. I'm starting to figure that out, he said. The next morning, Marcus did something unprecedented. He cleared his schedule for a week. His executive team was baffled. Mr. Chen, we have the investor meeting. Reschedule it. He spent that week at Meadowbrook not just visiting his mother but really seeing the place. He noticed the outdated equipment, the understaffed shifts, the residents who never had visitors. He saw Grace and her colleagues working themselves to exhaustion because they cared, despite being underpaid and underappreciated. One evening, he found Grace in the supply closet, frustrated. We're out of the good wound dressings again, she muttered. Budget cuts. We have to use the cheap ones that don't work as well. What else do you need? Marcus asked. Why? Just tell me. She listed things. Better medical supplies, more staff, updated equipment, repairs to the building, a proper activities program for residents. Marcus took notes on his phone, then he made calls. 2 weeks later, a delivery truck arrived at Meadowbrook. Then another, and another. New wheelchairs, state-of-the-art medical equipment, supplies that would last months, a check to hire 3 additional nurses. The staff was stunned. The administrator called Marcus, effusive with gratitude. But Grace found him in his mother's room, and she didn't look happy. Can we talk? She asked. Outside? In the hallway, she crossed her arms. What are you doing? Helping, Marcus said, confused by her reaction. No, you're writing checks again. That's what you do, right? Throw money at things to feel better about yourself. Marcus felt stung. I thought this was what you wanted. You said you needed supplies. We do need supplies, but we also need people who show up. We need systemic change, not one-time donations. We need... She stopped, taking a breath. I'm sorry, that was harsh. The donations are generous. Really, I've seen this before. Rich people swoop in, play hero, then disappear when it's not convenient anymore. Is that what you think I'm doing? Grace's expression softened. I don't know. Are you? The question hung between them. Marcus realized she was right to be skeptical. His whole life had been about grand gestures and moving on to the next thing. No, he said finally, I'm not. Grace, these past few weeks have changed me. Being here, seeing what you do, spending real time with my mother, it's shown me what I've been missing. I don't want to just write checks anymore. I want to actually make a difference. But I don't know how. Will you teach me? Grace studied his face, searching for sincerity. Whatever she saw there must have satisfied her, because she nodded slowly. Okay, but it's not glamorous work, Mr. Chen. Please, call me Marcus. Okay, Marcus. Be here tomorrow at 7 a.m. Wear clothes you don't mind getting dirty. Marcus showed up at 6:55 a.m. in jeans and an old t-shirt. Grace put him to work immediately, helping residents to the dining room, assisting with physical therapy exercises, playing board games, listening to stories. It was humbling. These simple acts of service required patience, presence, and genuine care, things money couldn't buy. He met James, a Korean War veteran with no living family, who taught him to play chess. He met Rosie, who had Alzheimer's and thought Marcus was her son, and he learned to simply sit with her confusion, rather than trying to fix it. He met dozens of people who had been invisible to him before, each with rich histories and deep humanity, and he watched Grace work. She wasn't just competent. She was extraordinary. She remembered that James liked his coffee with 2 sugars, that Rosie calmed down when you hummed old hymns, that his mother's arthritis was worse in the mornings. How do you remember all these details? Marcus asked one day. Because they're people, not tasks, Grace said simply. When you actually see someone, you remember. One afternoon, Marcus was helping his mother with a photo album when she said, You're different lately. Different how? Softer. More like the boy I raised. She patted his hand. I like this version of you. I like him better too, Mom. Eleanor smiled. Grace is good for you. Mom, I'm old, not blind. You look at her the way your father used to look at me. Marcus felt his face warm. Was it that obvious? That evening, He found Grace on the facility's small patio, taking a rare break. "Mind if I join you?" he asked. "Free country." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. "Can I ask you something personal?" Marcus ventured. "Depends on the question." "Why don't you have, someone like you? Are you seeing anyone?" Grace laughed. "Smooth, Marcus. Real smooth." She shook her head. "No, I'm not seeing anyone. Between work and school, I barely have time to sleep, let alone date. Plus, most guys are intimidated by a woman who knows what she wants and isn't afraid to work for it." "Their loss," Marcus said quietly. Grace looked at him, something shifting in her expression. "Marcus, what are we doing here?" "What do you mean?" "You and me. These conversations. You know we're from completely different worlds, right? Are we?" Marcus turned to face her. "Because lately, I've been thinking that maybe I've been living in the wrong world. Maybe the world you're in, where people matter more than profit margins, where showing up is more valuable than showing off. Maybe that's the world I should have been in, all along." "That's easy to say when you have billions in the bank," Grace said, but her voice was gentle, not accusatory. "You're right, I can't pretend to understand what it's like to struggle financially, but I'm starting to understand what it's like to be poor in the ways that actually matter. I've been bankrupt in kindness, destitute in real connection, impoverished in purpose. Grace, you've shown me what true wealth looks like." Grace's eyes glistened. "That's the most honest thing you've ever said to me." "I'm trying to be more honest. About everything." He took a breath. "Including the fact that I'm falling for you." The words hung in the air between them. Grace didn't respond immediately, and Marcus felt panic rising. "I'm sorry, that was inappropriate." "No," Grace interrupted. "It wasn't. Marcus, I need you to understand something. I don't want to be your project. I don't want to be the good deed that makes you feel better about yourself. And I definitely don't want to be some pretty woman fantasy where the rich guy saves the poor girl. That's not what this is," Marcus said urgently. "Grace, you're the one who's been saving me. You've shown me how to be human again. You've taught me what actually matters. If anything, I'm terrified that I'm not good enough for you." Grace searched his face, and slowly she smiled. "You're getting there." 2 days later, Marcus arrived at Meadowbrook to find chaos. An ambulance was parked outside, and staff members were rushing around. His heart seized. "What happened? Is it my mother?" "No," a nurse said. "It's Grace. She collapsed during her shift." Marcus felt the world tilt. "Where is she?" "They're taking her to County General." He ran to his car and drove to the hospital, his hands shaking on the wheel. At the emergency room, he demanded information, but they wouldn't tell him anything. He wasn't family. He struggled for words. "Please, I need to know she's okay." The doctor finally took pity on him. "She's stable. Severe exhaustion and dehydration. She's been working too hard for too long. Her body just gave out." Relief and guilt crashed over Marcus in equal measure. This woman, who had given so much to everyone else, had nothing left for herself. When they finally let him see her, Grace was asleep in a hospital bed, IV in her arm, looking smaller and more vulnerable than he'd ever seen her. He sat beside her and took her hand carefully. "I'm so sorry," he whispered. "You take care of everyone else, but who takes care of you?" Grace's eyes fluttered open. "Marcus, I'm here. Don't try to talk. Just rest." "I'm okay," she said weakly. "Just stupid. I thought I could handle another double shift." "You're not stupid. You're human. Grace, you can't pour from an empty cup." She smiled faintly. "That's usually my line." Over the next few days, Marcus made sure Grace had everything she needed. He paid her hospital bills before she could protest. He arranged for her to take a month off work, paid leave that he personally funded. He had healthy meals delivered to her apartment. When Grace found out, she called him, frustrated. "Marcus, you can't just—" "Yes, I can. And I will. Grace, you've spent your whole life taking care of others. Let someone take care of you for once. I don't need rescuing." "I know you don't, but everyone needs support sometimes. Even you. Especially you." There was a long pause, then quietly, "Thank you." During Grace's recovery, Marcus continued visiting Meadowbrook daily. His mother was thrilled to have him there, and he found himself genuinely enjoying the time with her. hearing stories from her childhood, learning about his father, who had died when Marcus was young, understanding where he came from. One afternoon, Eleanor said, "Your father would be proud of the man you're becoming." "Not the man I was?" Marcus asked. "He would have been proud of your success, but he would have been worried about your soul. He always said that making money was easy compared to making a life worth living." Marcus thought about his father, a humble accountant who had never made much money but had been rich in friends, generous with his time, present for his family. When had Marcus lost sight of those values? He started making changes. He restructured his company to prioritize employee well-being over maximum profit. He established a foundation, not for tax benefits, but genuinely focused on systemic change in healthcare and elder care. He began mentoring young entrepreneurs from disadvantaged backgrounds, giving them not just money, but time and guidance. And he visited Grace, who was slowly regaining her strength. They spent hours talking about their childhoods, their dreams, their fears. Grace told him about the foster homes, some kind, some cruel, and how she'd learned to be strong because she had no choice. "I used to think strength meant never needing anyone," she admitted. "But maybe real strength is letting yourself be vulnerable." "I'm learning that too," Marcus said. One evening, as they sat on Grace's small apartment balcony, she said, "I've been thinking about what you said, about falling for me." Marcus's heart raced. And I think I've been falling for you too, which terrifies me." "Why?" "Because I've never let myself depend on anyone. And you, Marcus, you could break my heart." He took her hand. "I could say the same thing. Grace, you've become the most important person in my life. You've changed everything about how I see the world. The thought of losing you terrifies me." "So what do?" Grace asked. "We take a chance. We trust each other. We build something real." Grace looked at him for a long moment, then leaned in and kissed him. Soft, tentative, full of possibility. 6 months later, Marcus stood in an empty warehouse space in an underserved neighborhood. Beside him, Grace reviewed architectural plans, her eyes bright with excitement. "The clinic will have 6 exam rooms, a pharmacy, a community education space," she said. "We can serve hundreds of people who don't have access to quality health care." "When do you want to open?" Marcus asked. 6 months, if we can manage it." "We'll manage it." Grace looked at him. "You know this is going to be expensive, right? And it's not going to make you any money." "I know. That's not why I'm doing it." "Why are you doing it?" Marcus smiled. "Because a very wise woman once taught me that real wealth isn't measured in dollars. It's measured in lives touched, in presence given, in love shared." Grace's eyes filled with tears. "You really have changed. You changed me." The clinic opened on schedule, with Grace as its director. Marcus was there every day, not as a benefactor, but as a volunteer, helping with intake, talking to patients, learning the names and stories of everyone who walked through the door. His mother came to the opening, beaming with pride. "Now this is the son I always knew you could be." Marcus's company continued to thrive, but he ran it differently now, with compassion, with purpose, with the understanding that success meant nothing if it came at the cost of his humanity. He and Grace moved in together, building a life that balanced both their worlds. She taught him to find joy in simple things: Sunday morning farmers markets, cooking dinner together, volunteering at the community center. He supported her dreams not with money alone, but with partnership, presence, and unwavering belief in her vision. One evening, a year after they'd met, Marcus and Grace sat on the patio at Meadowbrook, visiting his mother. Eleanor looked at them, her son and the woman who had transformed him, and smiled. "You two are going to get married, aren't you?" Grace laughed. "Mrs. Chen, well, are you?" Marcus looked at Grace, his heart full. "I hope so, if she'll have me." Grace squeezed his hand. "Ask me properly and find out." So Marcus did, right there, with his mother as witness. He didn't have a ring, that would come later, but he had something more valuable: a transformed heart, a life of purpose, and the courage to be vulnerable. "Grace, you saved my life, not by rescuing me, but by showing me how to live. Will you marry me?" Grace's answer was yes. 2 years later, Marcus stood in the community clinic, watching Grace teach a health education class to neighborhood residents. His mother sat in the front row, still sharp at 80, volunteering as a mentor to isolated seniors. Marcus's phone buzzed. a message from his company's CFO about another successful quarter. He smiled and put the phone away. The numbers mattered less now. What mattered was this: the laughter in this room, the lives being changed, the community being built. He thought about the man he'd been, isolated in his penthouse, measuring worth in dollars, missing what was right in front of him. That man seemed like a stranger now. Grace caught his eye and smiled, and Marcus felt the familiar warmth in his chest. Not the hollow ache of before, but something full and real and true. He'd spent years accumulating wealth, only to discover that he'd been poor in all the ways that mattered. Now, surrounded by people he loved and served, he finally understood what his father had known all along. The weight of gold is nothing compared to the weight of a life well lived, and he was, at last, truly rich.